Good afternoon. I am very pleased to welcome you this afternoon to our convocation to honor Mrs. Corazon Aquino, the former President of the Republic of the Philippines. The processional includes the faculty and staff of Seattle University, the deans of each of Seattle University's 8 schools and colleges, the vice presidents of the university, special platform guests, including the Archbishop of Seattle, the Most Reverend Alexander Burnett, and Mrs. Corazon Aquino, former President of the Republic of the Philippines, accompanied by the President of Seattle University, Father Stephen V. Sunborg, and the members of Seattle University's United Filipino Club. Please be seated for a moment. As we get settled, we are proud to have with us the Filipiana Dance Company. Filipiana is a collection of volunteers of Filipino heritage ranging in age from 14 to 70, whose main purpose is to share and propagate the Filipino culture in this region. They are led by Mr. Roger Del Rosario, the Filipiana Dance Company. Please stand now for the invocation, which will be offered by Ms. Darlene DeBose, the university's Director of Multicultural Student Affairs. Ms. DeBose.
Ms. Aquino, this is a great honor for me, particularly on this day. You cannot love while hating, progress while oppressing, come together in disunity, build while tearing down, join while separating, understand while not listening, give while withholding, create while destroying, overcome while in fear. It is simply impossible. We must make a choice. If we love each other as a foundation for our own progress, we do not have to worry about others hating us or our hating them. If we work with everyone for human good, giving what we can to create what we want, we will not be disturbed by what anyone attempts to take or keep from us. If we stand on faith in our ability to survive, it does not matter who is out to destroy us. If we celebrate, support, and nurture ourselves, we will not need anyone else to do it. Let us pray. Father, I pray for the leaders and the people of Afghanistan, Algeria, Armenia, Iran, Iraq, Israel, Jordan, Kuwait, Lebanon, Palestine, Saudi Arabia, Somalia, Sudan, Syria, the Philippines, Ramallah, Canada, the United States, and for a nation that is in a state of turmoil and unrest. Reveal to each of us our place and our part in world peace, that forgiveness, love, charity, hope, and your peace might reign in our hearts. Forgive us our bickering. Forgive us our fightings, our petty quarrels, our lack of civility, our injustices, and our evil desires. Forgive us as we misjudge, and forgive our misunderstandings. Forgive us our prejudices, our deceptions, our self-centeredness, and our lack of concern for our neighbors. We, your people, who were birthed in love and forgiven, ask that you love us still. I pray for protection and preservation of all nations, nationalities, races, groups, languages, and traditions, that Jew, Hindu, Christian, Muslim, Buddhist, and all the religions of the world would come to comprehend your love, your grace, your peace, your courtesies, your hope, your justice, passion, and care of us all. I pray for men, women, children, babies, and families all over the world. I pray for a multitude of people who are searching for world peace. Provide guidance to our nation's League of Leaders. Perseverance to the many believers who continue to place their faith in you. And even as you hold the cosmos in the palm of your hands, take us to your bosom and hold us. Comfort us with your unquenchable and fiery love. Strengthen us that we might be used of you. For many of us are hungry, seeking bread, full of silent questions, needing answers, consumed by pain, needing comfort, and overwhelmed by the troubles of this world, needing peace. Thank you for the grace wherein we stand. Thank you for all of our yesterdays, for in the midst of them, you are there. Thank you for all of our todays, for in the midst of them, you are there. Thank you for all of our tomorrows, for in the midst of them, you are there. Thank you, Father, for love everlasting, Jesus Christ, for in the midst of him, we are there. Amen.
Please be seated. Thank you, Ms. DuBose. Now let us continue our prayer as we turn our attention to the Seattle University Consort Singers as they sing for us Sa Ugoy ng Duyan, a Philippine lullaby. This performance is also a tribute to the song's much beloved composer, Professor Lucio San Pedro, who died in Rizal Province on March 31st of this year. Archbishop Brunette, Father Sundborg, platform guests, students, faculty, staff, alumni, and friends, we are pleased and honored to have all of you with us this afternoon as we welcome Mrs. Aquino. This is an important day in the history of Seattle University. As a Jesuit and Catholic university, we educate women and men not only to be exceptionally well prepared intellectually and professionally, but to become persons of conscience, committed to building a more just world. Today, we bestow the university's honorary doctoral degree on one whose life is a model of justice, a model for our students, one who has lived the biblical imperative to let justice flow like water and integrity like an unfailing stream. As we begin our convocation today, let me take a moment to introduce a number of our special guests that we have with us. First, we are delighted to welcome several members of Mrs. Aquino's family. I'd ask them to stand as I introduce them. Mrs. Aquino's daughter, Mrs. Maria Elena Cruz, her husband Eldon Cruz, and their children Justin and Jonty, and Mrs. Aquino's daughter, Victoria D., her husband, Richard D., and their children, Francis and Jacinta. We're very pleased to have you with us. Secondly, please meet today those who join me on the platform and whom you will not have the opportunity to meet during the course of the ceremony. I would ask for each of them to stand and remain standing, and then we can recognize them all as a group. First, the deans of our schools and colleges: Dr. Arthur Fisher, Dean of Matteo Ricci College; Father Patrick Howell of the Society of Jesus, Dean of the School of Theology and Ministry; Dr. Wallace Lowe, Dean of the College of Arts and Sciences; Dr. Joseph Phillips, Dean of the Albert School of Business and Economics; Dr. Sue Schmidt, Dean of the School of Education; Dr. George Simmons, Dean of the School of Science and Engineering; Dr. Mary Walker, Dean of the School of Nursing; Rudy Hassel, Dean of the School of Law; Catherine Walker, Vice President for Administration; Dennis Ronsmeyer, Vice President for Finance and Investments; Antone Harris of the Society of Jesus, Vice President for Mission and Ministry; Dr. Sue Secker, Vice President for Planning; Dr. Joan Clare, Interim Vice President for Student Development; Mary Kay McFadden, Vice President for University Advancement; Virgil DeMaun, President of the Associated Students of Seattle University; Pichi Lorenzo, President of Seattle University United Filipino Club; and Mr. Stephen Hooper, our brand new, as of May 1st, Chairperson of the Board of Trustees of the university. Please join me in recognizing these. Today, as we celebrate Mrs. Aquino's presence among us, we are pleased to have a number of distinguished guests who will offer greetings to Mrs. Aquino on behalf of their various constituencies. First, on behalf of the students, faculty, and staff of Seattle University, Jordan Corazon, a junior at SU, majoring in biology, whose permanent home is Makati in the Republic of the Philippines. Mr. Corazon.
Mabuhay! Magandang hapon po sa inyong lahat. Kagalang-galang na panauhin. Ikinagagalak ko na nabigyan ng pagkakataon, ipakilala kayo dito sa Seattle University sa okasyon na ito. On behalf of students, faculty, and staff, I welcome you, Corazon Aquino, to Seattle and to Seattle University. I'm honored to be standing in front of you today, especially for two big reasons. First, for having been chosen among the thousands of students in this institution and being given the privilege to welcome our honoree today. And second, I am deeply honored to share the stage with this distinguished person, our former president, who is a true role model of courage and strength for us Filipinos. In February 1986, a great and wonderful event happened in our country. I was 5 years old at that time, and I can still remember my parents talking about the many problems that our country faced. And that change in leadership was necessary. I did not understand exactly what this all meant. I noticed back then that my parents and their friends wore yellow shirts with the L sign on them. I later found out that L signified laban, a Tagalog word for let's fight. I would shout laban out in the streets with my family without really knowing what it was all about. Little did I know that this battle cry was to be the signal for real changes coming our way and an escape from dictatorial rule. I found out from my dad on the phone just a few days ago that he was a close friend and schoolmate of the son of your brother-in-law, the late Serviliano Aquino Jr. I never had the pleasure to meeting your nephew, one of my father's best friends, as this occurred before I was born. Nevertheless, this personal family connection makes me even more excited to participate in this very special event. When Senator Benigno Aquino was assassinated, many Filipino people revolted against the corrupt government led by Marcos. Due to the wrongful death of Senator Benigno Aquino, a peaceful cry of freedom from the Filipinos scattered throughout the country. Mrs. Aquino, you led them into battle with your strong Christian values, your strong commitment to the cause of your people, along with the help of the church and military, enabled people power to be established. It was a gathering of people that cried out for freedom. Without lives ruined or bloodshed, democracy was restored. The events that led to the People Power Revolution and the way you rose to the occasion and steadfastly led our country with the highest degree of sincerity for public service and also with the highest form of integrity is something that Filipinos, women and men, and everyone all over the world can appreciate and use as a role model. As a Filipino citizen studying here at Seattle University, I have learned to be a good person. Seeing our president here makes me proud to be a Filipino. It is my honor to welcome you to Seattle University, Corazon Aquino, the former president of the Republic of the Philippines.
To welcome Mrs. Aquino on behalf of the alumni of Seattle University, let me call on Lieutenant Commander Benis Aldana of the U.S. Coast Guard. He is a 1988 graduate of SU and was president of the Associated Students of Seattle U. Lieutenant Commander Aldana.
Good afternoon, Mrs. Aquino. 12 years ago, as a student here at Seattle University, I had the privilege of welcoming and greeting another living heroine on this campus, Ms. Rosa Parks, the mother of the civil rights movement here in the United States. In some ways, you remind me of her. Like her, you are a woman of great conviction. You too, in the midst of turmoil, in standing for equality, dignity, and freedom, possessed a quiet strength. A strength we all know only comes from a deep faith in God. You once said that faith is not simply a patience which passively suffers until the storm is past. Rather, it is a spirit which bears things with resignation, yes, but above all, with blazing, serene hope. In 1986, as a junior in high school, I can still recall the vivid media images of tanks rolling towards the crowds in Manila, only to be stopped by nuns kneeling in their path, saying the rosary, and elderly women disarming gun-carrying soldiers with motherly hugs. Through your sheer determination and deep faith, you managed to lead a democratic revolution without bloodshed, restore the Philippines' sense of identity and pride, and rule a republic with tranquility and grace. Like Rosa Parks, you taught us many valuable lessons. You taught us that when bullies rise up, we must stand up against them. You taught us that fighting injustice lies not only with the great, but also with ordinary people. Above all, you taught us to believe in miracles and the power of prayer. Your presence and your recognition here today, I hope, will re-inspire all of us to work harder to eliminate injustice whenever, wherever we encounter it. As representative of the Seattle University alumni, I am deeply honored and grateful to my alma mater for giving me the opportunity to welcome you to an institution of higher learning truly committed to preparing its future alumni to become servant leaders who not only do the right thing, but make right what is wrong. On behalf of the alumni, welcome to Seattle University. May God continue to bless you as you continue in your mission to bring about peace and justice in the Philippines. Mabuhay.
This university has great students and great alumni. To welcome Ms. Aquino on behalf of Seattle's Filipino American community, I call on Dr. Camilo de Guzman, President of the Filipino community of Seattle. Dr. de Guzman.
To all of us here today, I was asked, and I believe all the greeters were asked to present to you today a 1-minute greeting. So I am going to be a good Filipino today and stick to 1 to 2 minutes greetings. As president of the Filipino community of Seattle, and on behalf of the membership, I welcome you, President Corazon Aquino, to our new and beloved homeland and to our beautiful city of Seattle. We as a people are very proud to be Filipinos. We are proud to be Filipino Americans. And we are more proud for your coming into our lives. You have demonstrated to the world that with the help of people power, or in my language, common tao, an ordinary housewife has been changed all of a sudden to be the president of the Philippines. And this is something that could not be erased. This is something that has been destined to be, and we are all very proud that this happened in our lifetime. President Corazon Aquino has demonstrated to the world that everything or anything is possible under the guidance of God. And so we are deeply honored to be with you today, Cory. And this is the legacy that you are going to leave the world, and we will never forget you. Thank you.
And now, to welcome Mrs. Aquino, on behalf of the Church of Western Washington, the Most Reverend Alexander J. Burnett, the Archbishop of Seattle. Archbishop Burnett.
Mrs. Aquino, I can't tell you how deeply grateful I am that you are here today, and your presence here means so much to me as a person, since I have such great respect for you. There's a disadvantage of being the last speaker because everybody says all the nice things and takes all the thoughts that I wanted to say myself and express. But I still want to tell you very personally that as Archbishop here in the Archdiocese of Seattle, we cover a lot of area, 27,000 square miles, and we have about 800,000 Roman Catholics here. But I'm proud, very, very proud of the 50,000 Filipino Catholics that are in this Archdiocese. They are wonderful, wonderful people. They brought here from their land great, great qualities and great signs of faith. And during the course of the year, we have many occasions when we pause with them to recognize the things that they bring so much as part of their life from the Philippines. One of our great celebrations in Simbang Gabi, in which we celebrate the light that guides us and leads us and shows us the way. And that obviously is what you have in your life, in the role that you've played as President of the Philippines and as a leader in your country. The Filipino community also has many pious customs and practices that sometimes are very helpful to us to see how deeply rooted that faith is, a faith that motivates them in all that they do. I can't help but think, as I mentioned to you before, that the last Saturday we had a wonderful picnic at the cemetery. A wonderful picnic, 400 Filipinos who gathered to dedicate a statue to Our Lady of Antipolo, a town from which your mother comes. And this particular statue has always been a sign or symbol of people who immigrate and move from one country to another, a sign of hope and faith, of peace, a sign of safe voyage. They take that with them in their hearts, and when they come to this country and they make great contributions, I'm proud of their contributions here. But when I look at your life and your history, I recognize that you have much to bring to us because they represent the faith that you represented so much in your life. One of your wonderful quotations that I like is when you said reconciliation should be accompanied by justice, otherwise it will not last. Well, we all hope for peace. It shouldn't be a peace at any cost, but a peace based on principle, on justice. I think you have taught us that so well with your life, and that's one of the great gifts that the Filipino people bring to this Archdiocese. Thank you for being such an inspiration, and welcome to the Archdiocese of Seattle.
Now, please welcome Father Stephen V. Sundborg of the Society of Jesus, the 21st President of Seattle University. Father Sundborg.
Good afternoon, and Mrs. Aquino, Archbishop Burnett, faculty, students, alumni, and friends, honored guests, welcome to Seattle University. You can't imagine how pleased we are with this very special day of bestowing an honorary doctorate on Corazon Aquino. It is now my pleasure as the president of Seattle University and on behalf of Seattle University to confer that honorary degree. Mrs. Aquino, would you stand? From housewife to political widow to quiet revolutionary, Corazon Aquino, you have distinguished your legacy through commitment to economic justice, nonviolent change, and restoration of power to the people. Today, Seattle University is proud to honor you as a great champion of democracy, justice, and faith, and as former president of the Republic of the Philippines. Mrs. Aquino, in Spanish, your first name means heart. In Philippine politics, your second name signifies martyred opposition in memory of your late husband, Benigno Aquino, once Ferdinand Marcos' chief political rival, who was slain on his return from exile in 1983. You have been called a Joan of Arc, a Cinderella, and a Blessed Mother. You are sure of the foundation below you, your family and your faith. And as you inspire faith, it is largely because you are inspired by it. Your belief that you are an instrument of God gives purpose and meaning to your life's work. You inspired others to become heroic themselves, and your courage spread to millions who were hungry for justice. Your nickname, Cory, was a symbol. You were a victim of injustice, and more important, the person who could deliver and liberate the Filipinos from that injustice. Your emergence as a leader was both a metaphor and an inspiration for those who rallied to topple a tyrant. On September the 21st, 1972, Fernando Marcos imposed martial law on the Philippines. Senator Benigno, your husband of 28 years, was quickly confined to a military jail and a solitary life in prison for the next 7 years. You looked after your home and your family and served as your husband's surrogate during his incarceration, mapping out strategies, plans, and calls to action. As your husband languished in prison, you became his eyes, ears, and voice in the outside world, acting as his liaison with what remained of the Philippine opposition. For 7 years and 7 months, spending hours alone with your husband in his cell, you received tutorials in opposition strategies. You had to smuggle messages to and from your husband, sometimes on scraps of paper, sometimes in your head. In 1980, Ninoy needed a triple coronary bypass, and Marcos allowed him to seek treatment in our country, the United States. In the Philippines, opposition leaders anticipated his return and hoped to unify the opposition through him. However, he was fatally shot on August the 21st, 1983, when he returned home to join the opposition. You quickly rose to lead the opposition and carry out your husband's unrealized dreams. You reluctantly agreed to run for president when Marcos called a snap election, and you were presented with 1 million signatures from Filipino supporters. You campaigned on a platform of faith, hope, and charity. You were swept into office by a wave of peaceful, popular support, which would become to be known the People Power Revolution. Crowds chanted, "Cory, Cory," but you reminded them that their country had been liberated not by one leader, but by the extraordinary acts of ordinary people. During your 6 years in office, you returned the rule of law to the Philippines, implemented checks and balances on executive power, presided over a series of free elections, and dismantled monopolies controlled by Marcos's allies, actions that established political stability and fueled economic growth. Today, you continue to serve the world as leader, a model, an inspiration for peace and for justice. Now may I ask Steve Hooper, Chair of Seattle University's Board of Trustees, and Mrs. Aquino to join me here. Please. In recognition of your unwavering advocacy for justice, nonviolence, and democracy, and for your faith and conviction that inspired your nation, upon you, Mrs. Corazon Aquino, Seattle University proudly confers the degree of Doctor of Humane Letters, honoris causa.
Good afternoon to all of you. Good afternoon, Father Steve Sundberg, Archbishop Burnett, the administration, the faculty, the students, the platform guests, and in particular, I want to thank my fellow Filipinos for the beautiful dance and also for the singing. It makes me feel as if I never left the Philippines. I feel particularly blessed today for having been chosen by an esteemed institution under the Society of Jesus to receive this honorary degree. Beyond the distinct honor that Seattle University has bestowed on me, I am gratified by your vote of confidence, so to speak, on my life's work. Seattle University, under Father Sundberg's leadership, has fostered bonds of special concern and friendship with the Philippines and the Filipino community in this part of the USA. With this honor conferred on my person, Seattle University has also recognized the wider significance of some events in our recent history, which we believe have made a difference in the political history of our time. My gratitude then to this outstanding academic community for its serious involvement in the worldwide issues which the human family must today increasingly confront. Your approval emboldens me to go further in the direction I have taken, seeking fresh avenues of service to the people for God's greater glory. People of the Church have filled a marked presence in my life, and Jesuits have always had a special place in my heart. Throughout the long and anguished years of my late husband's detention as a prisoner of conscience, Jesuit fathers were always among those who gave him and me and our children the strength to endure the rank injustice. For my husband, Ninoy Aquino, was not just a political prisoner detained like any rebel caught in the field. He was imprisoned for protecting democracy by exposing on the Senate floor a palace conspiracy to destroy it. He could have walked out of his cell anytime he was prepared to strike a separate peace with a dictatorship that wanted so much for him to end his challenge to its legitimacy. What could make a person lose his faith in God's justice more than to be punished for doing right, to be arrested for defending democracy on the authority of its laws? On the part of his family, what could be better calculated to make them lose their faith in God's caring than to be deprived of a husband and father's company and support? It was the Jesuit fathers who focused our minds on that slim hope and consolation of a Christian, which says that trials are a mark of favor and undeserved tribulation, a sign of God's special attention, and that in losing much, a person has the first sure sign of a greater gain in store, not only in character and grace, but a place of greater honor and safety nearer our Lord. I owe to the Jesuit fathers also the wonderful insight that if everything would seem to depend on God, God would still want the good in the world to come about through our efforts so that we might be co-creators of his kingdom. Pray, said Saint Ignatius, knowing that all things depend on God, but act as if all depended on our human effort. Thus, the freedom struggle in the Philippines found many of the Jesuit fathers at the forefront, though their best work was, as usual, behind the scenes. They and their alumni supplied much of the intellectual ammunition for the fight. Their counsel turned anger into agenda. Their organizational skills helped shape outrage into a moral force for political victory. Not since St. Ignatius left the profession of arms to close in on the great enemy in the battlefield of the human soul, indeed, not since the light went out in the last mission in Paraguay, have men in black been so conspicuous in a fight of right versus wrong. It was an uneven contest between those who had the monopoly of arms and those who, with only the strength of their convictions, handily beat them. What I came to admire most about the Jesuits is how they strive to perfect all human skills and talents, and then through prayer and self-renunciation, empty themselves to receive the grace that will show the best use of them for the service of people and God's greater glory. This may be a greater achievement than striking a rock and drawing water, or parting the Red Sea to cleave a path to safety. The first was a thirst quencher, and the second a shortcut. But to make of every Christian God's direct agent in human affairs, achieving the good for which he prays, that is a miracle that turns men and women somewhat into angels. In a way, it surpasses the suspension of the laws of nature by overcoming the basic human instinct to act out of self-interest and do right even at the price of one's life. By interacting with the Jesuit fathers and their spirituality, I have come to refine my own reflection and prayer and actions. This helped me immensely in finding my bearings as a Filipino and necessarily as a Catholic through the major upheavals in my country before, during, and after my presidency. 19 years ago, I suffered my own 9/11. Like that event, the imposition of martial law in my country was a collective calamity. But as it is with any tragedy, in the last analysis, the blow was personal. My husband was taken from me. Our children lost their father. When next we saw him, he was in jail, imprisoned unjustly. Suffering is solitary. You can sympathize with another's pain, but you can experience only your own. When you commemorate 9/11 again, do not recall the collapse of two of the world's tallest buildings or the momentary humbling of a great nation's pride. Remember rather the widows and orphans, the grieving parents, recalling each one as having lost their world when the Twin Towers collapsed. Indeed, we are alone with our grief, though when I would lose him forever, I would have millions by my side. The loss was not less, but the consolation was inestimable. Like 9/11, martial law came like a sneak attack, catching the guardians of democracy defenseless and off guard. My husband was arrested in a Senate conference committee. The country's leading publishers were hustled out of their beds to join him in detention. His own detention would last longer than all of theirs combined, and it would end in a brazen act of murder. After keeping him in prison for 7.5 years, the dictatorship finally released him, and under pressure from human rights groups and the Carter administration, exiled him to the United States. That gave us, in this country, 3 of the happiest years of our lives together, but only 3. With things going from bad to worse back home, my husband decided to return against the advice of his friends and even the warnings of his enemies. Back he went, feeling that in his free state and of his own free will, he could offer the dictatorship a hand of cooperation in returning the country to democracy before it slipped beyond hope into chaos. He arrived on August 21, 1983, and was quickly taken away by a military escort in full view of the international media. Seconds later, shots rang out. The cameras caught the image that would inflame a nation and stir the conscience of the world. A man all in white, sprawled face down on the airport tarmac, one arm reaching out as though in friendship, a pool of blood spreading around his face. All tragedies, even national ones, are personal in the last analysis. Personal to the man who felt the bullet slam into his neck, personal to the widow who had hoped to spend the rest of their lives together. Each person suffers loss in his or her own way. No one can share it. But I did not know that when Ninoy Aquino was killed, millions of Filipinos took it, each one, as a personal loss, and went out to the streets to denounce it as a national outrage. Thus began my odyssey from a life in the shadow of a great man to the glare of a nation's and even the world's attention. You know the story, how patience turned away anger and weakness pacified force. The images are still vivid of nuns and priests in the forefront of the mass of ordinary folk, kneeling in the path of oncoming tanks, rosaries raised in prayer, the soldiers leaving the tanks to join them. I like to think that these images of defenseless courage inspired imitation throughout the world. The Velvet Revolution in Czechoslovakia and the fall of the Berlin Wall. It may have emboldened that solitary Chinese with a briefcase who, rather than go to office that day, chose to block a column of tanks on their way to Tiananmen Square. Dictatorships on both sides of the Iron Curtain toppled before a force as soft as water and unyielding as stone. Peaceful people power, such as might yet bring freedom and justice to places like Palestine without so much bitterness and loss of life. The Cold War merely threatened to extinguish mankind wholesale in a nuclear holocaust of which both sides were afraid. Today, humanity is being fearlessly and systematically reduced in hot and real wars. The world has the productive capacity to feed mankind twice over, yet millions are dying of famine today. And despite new weapons of unprecedented power, we witness a helpless descent into violence and anarchy around the world. Countless politicians and bureaucrats pay lip service to the war against poverty, not to mention the war against war, yet the words and the will can barely keep pace with the speed and scale of the changes as globalization marks its inexorable progress around the globe. My country is no exception to this situation. Our only consolation is that the counterforce of people's organizations demanding accountability and fairness, not only from governments but also from international institutions, grows apace. From Seattle to Doha to Monterey, people are asking for a fairer deal for the disadvantaged today, from those who took advantage of them in the past. The hope is for a future where they can stand shoulder to shoulder with those who once rode on their backs. The more advanced nations are forced to be more sensitive to the disparities for which they were in some measure to blame, and to accommodate cultural nuances that dictate a different pace and way of development. The bottom line cannot dictate everything if the center is to hold. The same sensitivity is demanded of the better-off sectors within each society. One can only ignore this force for change at one's peril. Stripped of racial and sectarian layers, the recent upheavals in the world may be viewed as lapses in our collective sense of humanity. Yet it would be futile for us to simply stop at determining where the blame might lie. It would be more productive to envision how permanent healing might possibly take place. Last year's tragic event and the carnage in the Middle East these past 2 months should serve to remind us that globalization is not just about market linkages. It is also about human connections. The free market system may take only what it wants, but in the end, it lies with people to decide what is a fair price to pay so that the exchange shall be not just profitable for one side, but a continuing one for both. Superior weaponry can decide who and how many shall die. It cannot dictate how people choose to live or die. Concepts like globalization and free markets are meaningless in a society marred in poverty. As Francis Moore Lapierre wrote in Rediscovering America's Values, poverty isn't just a relative concept distinguishing those with more from those with less. It is a substantive evil that hurts people, stunts their growth, and ends their lives. Poverty is also, as she put it, and I quote, about our relationship with others, for there is a point not too hard to discern at which a lack of resources makes it impossible for us to participate in the community and to find meaning in our daily lives, end of quote. Beyond distinguishing the have and have less, it puts aside those with barely anything at all and consigns them to oblivion. This cannot be permitted. How can we motivate people to be competitive in the free market if they have no strength for the match? In a game whose rules are fixed by the perennial winners, who among the losers will step into the ring to fight by the rules? Meeting the needs of the impoverished without destroying their dignity is a primary test of any society's humanity, she concluded. What is sad, according to Marianne Williamson in The Fabric of the Future, is that we, quote, have allowed ourselves to fall in line behind the gross delusion that economic principles are more important than humanitarian principles, end of quote. With an act of will, that false equation can be undone. Economics is about means. People are about purposes, the aims that make lives worth living. In this shift to reverse priorities and complement economics with decency, no one is too small to play a part. Along these lines, there seems to be a growing convergence of views. Claude Smadja, managing director of the World Economic Forum, warns that globalization cannot remain a process driven mostly by business. Profound anxieties among people and basic inequalities within societies and between countries must be addressed. By focusing on people-to-people relationships, we are in a better position to respond to these fundamental concerns. The emerging consensus is that it is not enough to make an economy work, even at the expense of other economies, but to put all economies in sync with each other toward their mutual and continuing advantage. This is not just compassion, it is sound business sense. You can't sell to those with nothing to pay. In this global crisis, we should return to our basic values, no matter what our religion. Ideas of God differ throughout the world, but the cornerstone of all genuine religions is prayer rather than provocation, and self-sacrifice rather than self-interest. All genuine religions seem to hold in common the belief that in giving we receive, in losing we gain, and in dying we come to a truer life in this and the world to come. No religion enjoins taking. Thus, capitalism is not a religion, notwithstanding the fervor with which it is pursued. Early this year, representatives from all the great religions gathered at the Piazza San Francesco in Assisi, Italy, for an ecumenical day of prayer for peace in the world. That extraordinary day showed that diversity in religion and culture, far from impeding mutual understanding and frustrating common action, actually enriches perspectives in espousing shared values. It showed that in the area of religion, which once spawned the unforgiving wars, genuine goodwill can achieve the harmonious globalization that has eluded trade, finance, and diplomacy, where the success of globalization was more expected. It showed that while people differ in their ideas of God and the ways of reaching Him, they agree that there is only one way to live with each other, in peace. Globalization can force us closer together on the economic and political planes, but without globalization in the spiritual realm, it cannot help us to live together. Globalization, said Father Richard Riskavich, I hope that's the right pronunciation, Society of Jesus of the U.S. Jesuit Conference, has blurred the borders between international and domestic questions. Today, we are forced to fish, each out of his own boat, in the same overcrowded lake, but only with a shared apostolate will we ride in the same boat and pull at the same net. It is fitting to recall that we are commemorating this year the 450th anniversary of the death of St. Francis Xavier, one of the founders of the Society of Jesus. In a relatively brief life of 46 years, he became one of the Church's greatest missionaries. By his example, St. Francis Xavier taught us the value of living a full life in the service of God and his fellow men. There lies the key to harmonious coexistence between the planet's diverse civilizations, that we should strive to be men and women for others. This has been the very theme of the Jesuit apostolate in the Philippines. The record of how far that commitment has been fulfilled is a breathtaking panorama spanning the major stages in my country's history. The alumni of my husband's school, the primary Jesuit institution, Ateneo de Manila, have compiled a list of the Jesuit-educated heroes and patriots of at least 3 eras. The first era belongs to the 19 heroes and patriots of the Philippine War of Liberation against Spain and the Philippine War against American aggression. There was the quintessential Malay hero Jose Rizal, writer, philosopher, naturalist, doctor of medicine, and a swordsman of the first rank. There were the young intellectuals of the propaganda movement, the insurrectionists of the initial revolt, rebels and rebel priests. There were the generals of the Revolutionary Army who drove the Spaniards from the field to win the country's independence, only to take to the field within 48 hours to protect that independence against the United States. Scorning to fight except by any but the most civilized rules, they were admired by their enemies. They paid for their gallantry with defeat. 20 patriots are on the list for the Second World War. Brilliant students with promising careers gave it all up for something of greater value, freedom. Among them was Father Horacio de la Costa, S.J., who even as a scholastic was tortured in Fort Santiago and held in solitary confinement there. Father de la Costa shared the strength he developed from that experience with my husband Ninoy during the latter's long detention. In the fight against martial law, the order of battle of the Forces of Freedom reads like the roster of alumni of the Jesuit schools. At least 55 heroes and martyrs are listed, among them my husband Ninoy, whose assassination sparked the second revolution of its kind after Gandhi's. It was a harvest to make a Jesuit educator's heart swell with pride and joy. These 3 generations of heroes and patriots reflect the diversity of struggles that the products of Jesuit education in my country faced with a common courage. The battlefields varied, though it was always the same enemy behind a different disguise, injustice and tyranny. And through the centuries, it would be the same response, a proclaiming of one's faith through the struggle against injustice in one's time. My themes today seem to ring with particular resonance in a city like Seattle, which carries an ambiance at once cosmopolitan and compassionate. It was here 2 years ago that strident voices of protest forced the world's leaders to look beneath their global bottom lines at the mass of casualties crowding there without hope, the third world poor and the unemployed of the first world. Since Seattle, the world's richest and biggest, have had to reckon with the same demand heard in Genoa, Doha, and Monterrey. For fair and not just free markets, for the same starting point for everyone in the race to the future, instead of the one today, where the strongest and fastest are already 2 or 3 laps ahead. The progress in this struggle may be credited as well to the reasoned arguments and unfailing logic, the eloquence and moral high ground of the protagonists as to their passion and courage. It shows the superior advantage, at least from our experience, of a Jesuit education. Yet the best prepared mind cannot cope with today's challenges without constant nourishment from God. Thus, we cannot but keep returning to the main point I want to share with you today. To do lasting good in the world, we must seek God's will, humbly on our knees, and strive to do it by the light and power He gives us. As always, the psalmist's words remain abidingly true. Unless the Lord build the house, in vain do the workers labor. Any other way, however brightly illuminated by intelligence, is vulnerable to the law of unintended and often tragic consequences. Only through doing God's will can we be sure to do the right thing. Only through prayer and reflection can we be reasonably certain it is God's will that we do. Logic and learning by themselves won't do it. It is only in that manner that we can engage fully with the world, even throw ourselves completely into it, while keeping inviolate an area of light and peace within us, so that we never lose ourselves in the struggle and our way in the world. That has been my experience anyway, which made people sometimes misinterpret my equanimity as a deficiency in awareness of the dangers I faced. Oh, I was fully aware. and I knew both what to do and what to leave to God. Everything in either case, as the Jesuits so wisely put it. The Jesuits whom I have known showed me how hard work, application, and faith can help one out of any crisis. We pray to connect with God and do good, in a sense to speak with Him, because deeds speak louder than words. Indeed, the unremitting service of mankind, such as Mother Teresa devoted herself to, may be the longest conversation it is possible to hold with God without being afraid that He will hang up on you. That may be why Mother Teresa's needs were always answered. The honor you bestow on me this day is but a reflection of the good work of the Jesuits in my country. They taught me that the easy path is rarely the right one, and the road least traveled is probably the right one to take when no one returns from the road most trodden. Dear friends here at Seattle University, once again I want to express my thanks to you and to Father Sundborg for this gift of recognition and honor that you have given me and through me to our people. Seattle University's alumni in our country are making their notable contribution as we face the challenges and problems of our nation at this difficult time. And I am sure the superb education they have received here, with Seattle U's own outstanding commitment to Christian wisdom, to Jesuit ideals and purposes, and to the crucial struggle to create in our time a world at once more human and more divine, will help us significantly in our present endeavors. It is thus with a deep sense of gratitude that I accept this honorary doctorate and bring it back to my country to share with those who deserve to share it. Thank you.
I felt utterly humbled to be a Jesuit in the line of the Jesuits that influenced you and your husband and your family and your country. And I believe we as a university and a city also feel humbled by your presence and your words and what you say to us and what they mean to us. Indeed, it's an amazing experience to be with you and to hear you and to receive that message. Thank you again very much. It was about a year and a half ago that I traveled to the Philippines and to Manila, and accompanied by Father Ben Nebres, the president of the Jesuit Ateneo de Manila, and John Concepcion, for whom Corazon Aquino was a sponsor at his wedding, and by Jim Hembry. We went to Mrs. Aquino's house on a Saturday morning, and she doesn't usually receive visitors on a weekend, but she has a hard time saying no to Jesuits. And we went, and she welcomed us into her home, and she showed us some of the paintings that she had recently painted, and she asked about our families. She gave me a Christmas gift and a Christmas card, and I was struck how personal and familial and gentle is this great world leader. And I knew on that day, and I know even more on this afternoon, what a tremendous blessing it is for our university and for our city to be able to honor Corazon Aquino on this day, and how much our world has waited for and needed this hopeful, inspiring, prayerful, faithful message that she has given us. She was to have come on October the 19th, and after the events of September the 11th, I received an email, and it didn't say, "I cannot come," or "I am postponing." I quote, it said, "Father, I plead with you to postpone." I think she would have come if I'd said, "Sorry, it was a deal." But it's providential that she's come now, at this time in this year, after all that we've experienced and the present condition in our world and all that we experience in our church and with terrorism in the Middle East and Enron and sort of the way in which there's something that has become loose underneath our footing within the world, to receive at this time the uplifting force of her message and her message of hope and her faith and her courage. Mrs. Corazon Aquino, you are, for me and for us, a leader of faith and of courage, and a very, very personal one, and we need that. Thank you very much. At the present time, Mrs. Aquino's efforts are directed mainly or significantly toward the support of the Benigno Aquino Foundation and Center. And so Seattle University is proud to make as a gift a contribution to that center as a gift from Seattle University. And we encourage our friends to also help support you in this great work. So let me give you this gift.
As part of our academic convocation today, a number of our Seattle University students would like to engage Mrs. Aquino in a question and answer period. And so I'm going to ask each of the students to approach the microphone and identify themselves with their question.
My name is James Bible. I'm a second-year law student at Seattle University. And Mrs. Aquino, I'd like to take this moment to thank you for sharing your experiences and wisdom with us. You are not just an inspiration to the people that are in this room, but to all people that are seeking to make positive social change. My question for you is, where do you find the inspiration to fight corruption, even when the odds seem to be against you? And what do you think it takes to win in that struggle?
Well, when we were fighting Marcos, it was also because of the corruption that pervaded his entire administration. And we saw how it was really making it difficult for all Filipinos to live decently. And I suppose, like my husband, when I believe it is the right thing to do, then I just go ahead and do it and not worry about what may possibly happen to us personally. And can I just tell you what my husband said? This was actually the night before he left Boston, and he was telling me about the possible scenarios that would happen when he returned to Manila. And he said, maybe they will arrest me at the airport and take me back to my detention camp in Fort Bonifacio, or they might take me to the Philippine Heart Center, given that I had that triple bypass operation, or they might be kind and allow me to go under house arrest in our own home. But he said, if Marcos makes the mistake and has me killed, then it will be the best thing that will happen to me, because I've always wanted to die for our country. So I guess it's a rare privilege to be able to die for one's country. And when he was assassinated, I told this to my children, and it helped them better understand, this tragedy that had come to us. So in corruption, it's best to lead by example. I mean, I can't tell the rest of the government, that you have to be honest. If I don't, as I said, lead by example, if I am not honest myself, if I am not strict about not giving special privileges to friends and family. So I try to do this, but it's a very difficult thing when government officials and workers in the Philippines are paid very low wages. The temptation is just so enormous. Let me tell you how much I was paid when I was first president. This was before the new constitution, before the 1987 constitution. I was receiving 8,000 pesos. At that time, the dollar was 25 to 1. So roughly, is it $200? My son-in-law, Dodo, is good at math. And is it $200? About $200 a month. When the new constitution was ratified in a plebiscite, so they gave me a raise from 8,000 pesos to 25,000 pesos. So in today's exchange, it'd be $500. But then, of course, every month there's there's a fundraising event going on, and each organization was vying to get my $500. But you can imagine how much worse it is going down the line. I mean, here I am president and getting that much. But so Lee Kuan Yew, when he first visited me, gave me the advice that you have to try to bring down the numbers, in the bureaucracy, so that hopefully you can give better wages. But how could I have removed people from their jobs when they're already having a difficult time as it is? So it's, hopefully our economy will improve, and so that we can give better wages to government workers, and so that they will not be tempted to engage in corrupt activities. But I think Singapore was able to do it because, of course, it's just a city-state. I mean, they have fewer people to contend with, and they were able to immediately give attractive salaries, almost equal or even more than what the private sector was giving. So maybe that could be a way. At the same time, we also pray, together with our action, that we will be able to do it in the Philippines. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mrs. Aquino. My name is Annalisa Perez, and I'm an undergraduate student here, majoring in criminal justice. I need to first say that it's with great admiration and blessed thanks that we can gather as a community to celebrate your mission. I'm very honored. My question is one that I'm sure you've been asked many times. However, I feel it further distinguishes you as a political and spiritual icon of strength and perseverance, and the argument that a housewife is not so ordinary. With that in mind, my question is, can you tell us about any special challenges that you faced as a woman in politics?
Oh, quite a number. I think we women have to prove ourselves twice as hard as the men, unfortunately for us. But anyway, I think in the Philippines, since we now have our second woman president, apparently I wasn't too bad after all, because they dared elect us, have a second one. Well, I don't like this contest, between who is the better person, between a woman or a man. And I'd like to believe that when people voted for me, they were not voting for me because I was a woman, but hopefully because they believed I was a better candidate. And I always say that women and men, instead of competing with each other, should try to complement each other. And we have seen in the Philippines, like, many women who have started businesses on their own, and the husband having to give up his job to assist the woman in her company or whatever. So I hope the time will come when you, in the United States, will also have your first woman president. one thing in favor of a woman head of government is, I think when you meet with your counterparts all over the world, they're extra nice to you. So I have no complaints in that respect. And certainly they were very kind to me and were very gentlemanly. And this happened in, I attended 2 events, the funeral of Emperor Hirohito, where there were 56 of us heads of government or heads of state, and in the bicentennial celebration of the French Revolution in Paris, there were 30 of us. In Paris, there were only 3 women, Margaret Thatcher, Benazir Bhutto, and myself. And I was so happy when the people in the Philippine embassy told me, you know, when the TV commentator was referring to the women heads of government, they didn't have to ask anybody who that person was. But with the 27 other heads of government, of course, they knew who President Bush was, but for the others, they'd have to ask somebody, so who is that? And so even for that, well, we were just 3, but I think everybody knew us.
Good afternoon, Mrs. Aquino. I'd like to thank you for gracing us with your presence and your great example these days. My name is Georgina Severin, and I'm a senior majoring in economics and theology. Before I ask you my question, I just wanted to let you know that it's an honor to be here in your presence, not only because of the extraordinary woman you are, but because I have a message from my mom.
Oh, really? What is it?
You're her hero.
Oh, thank you very much.
The question I have is regarding democratization in the Philippines. How has the rise and development of democratization in the Philippines affected economic development?
Well, before President Marcos became our president, we were second in Asia, second only to Japan insofar as economy was concerned. After 20 years of Marcos, we became a basket case. So democracy very clearly was needed in the Philippines. And so when I became president, I dismantled both the sugar and coconut monopolies. I also made it very clear that there were not to be any behest loans. These behest loans were done during Marcos's time, and he would write to the heads of financial institutions and tell them to lend money to, his cronies, even if the project was not feasible economically. So I made sure that the heads of the government financial institutions would be very clear that I was not about to recommend anybody getting a loan, and they were the ones to study it carefully, whether it would be beneficial to the government or not. So somebody had told me before that developing countries are not ready for a democracy. And I said, maybe for some it isn't so, but Filipinos really love freedom, and and we tried it under a dictatorship, and it didn't work. So Filipinos not only love their freedom, but they're willing to sacrifice for it. And I hope that in time, we will be able to get our economy to recover, and that we will also have our position among the developed countries in the world. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mrs. Aquino.
Good afternoon.
My name is Marcelino Gubalia, and I'm a graduate business student here at Seattle University. And before I ask you my question, I do want to say, as a Filipino-American who grew up in the United States, that you have been an inspiration to me and my family, so I thank you.
Thank you.
The question that I have is in 3 parts, and it deals with a subject matter that you mentioned in your presentation earlier about globalization. And the first part is, what are the advantages and disadvantages of economic globalization for the Philippines specifically? And the second part is this a benefit to the Philippines? And the third part is, do you think the local companies in the Philippines would be able to compete against large corporations because of globalization?
Well, of course, the plus would be that the world market would be open to us, and if we did not belong to the WTO, then we would be in trouble also. But the disadvantages, of course, are many, and in fact, even in your own country here, where I think President Bush raised the tariff on steel, so you had complaints coming from Japan, South Korea, China. In the Philippines, when there was a plan also to increase the tariff or to lower the tariff on cement, because we are a cement-producing country, but cheap cement was coming in, so it was really wreaking havoc on the industry. I think and I hope that as we study what is best for each country and for the whole world, that there will be patience on the part of those who have, for those who have less. And as I said, globalization cannot just be dealing on the economic matters, but it should be on a people-to-people relationship. And it's very difficult for us who come from a developing country to get our voice heard. But I hope that we will be heard, and that at least it could be explained to us why what we are proposing is not feasible at this time, or if there is a chance that in the near future it could be addressed. Okay, but I'm happy that finally America is allowing our mangoes to come in.
Hi, Mrs. Aquino. My name is Kim Cabral, and I'm a second-year undergrad majoring in theology. And I thank you so much for being here with us today. I consider it a great blessing. My question for you is especially important for me because my parents were born and raised in the Philippines, but I was born and raised here. So I'd like to ask you, what advice would you give to Filipinos and others here in the United States who would like to help the Philippines? What can we do?
Well, what you have done today is already a big help, that you have shown your fellow Americans that we certainly take pride in our culture, and the dances and the songs, in fact, speak of the culture that we have even before the Spaniards and the Americans came. And I understand from the Archbishop that the Filipino-American Catholics here are also contributing much to the church. So I think all you have to remember, and I think you would know by now, which are the good traits and the not so good traits of Filipinos. So why don't we just concentrate on our good qualities? And it's important for us to adopt the good qualities, especially for you, of your host country. And once I was asked what I consider the best quality of Filipinos, and well, I said maybe it's our friendly nature. If we, especially in Asia, I think would be the friendliest. And so we really try to reach out to anybody and everybody, which I think is a very good trait. But I'd like for us Filipinos to be punctual like the Americans and the Chinese. I think when I was president, the diplomatic corps got the surprise of their lives when I was always on time, and maybe 5 minutes ahead of time. And they would be running to their seats because in Marcos's time, it would be an hour, 2 hours late. So I think it is for us to learn from others and to share what we have with others. No country is perfect, but we can all strive towards being near perfect by adopting from other nationalities what we consider their better traits. And hopefully they see something also good in us, and will try to be like us. Okay?
Thank you.
And now, Mrs. Aquino, we offer a special gift to you. The Seattle University Consort Singers, directed by Dr. Joy Sherman, will sing for you Bayan Ko, the Consort Singers.
Bayan magiliw, kailas ng silanganan, alap ng puso, sa titik ko'y buhay.
Lupang hinirang, tuyan ka ng magiting, sa manlulupig, di ka pasisiil, lupa ng araw ng walhati, umayalangit, aming ligaya na may mga api, ang mamatay ng dahil. Bayan kong Pilipinas, bayan kong Pilipinas, bayan kong Pilipinas, lupain ang kintang bulaklak, mahilingan sa kanyang balat, magalay ng gandang dilag, at sa kanyang yumi at ganda, kayumanan na halina. Bayan kong inihan ka, nasalat sa dusa. Ulan ay layang lumimang, pulunin mo at umiiyak. Bayang makayang sa kanila, ang dilag na sa magkaamas. Iiyak sa ibigyan, sa larawan ay halika. Halika, makita ka sa bayan. Bayang magiliw, pero sa silanganan, alam ng puso, sa dibdib ko'y buhay. Lupang hinirang, tuyan ka ng magiting, sa manlulupi, di ka pasisiil, lupa ng araw ng walhati, aming ligaya naman ay mga api, ang mamatay ng dahil sa'yo.
Please remain standing for our benediction to be offered by the Reverend Peter Ely of the Society of Jesus, rector of the Seattle University Jesuit Community and a member of the Theology Department. Father Ely.
Let us pray. We close this celebration deeply touched by the words of our guest, Corazon Aquino. You, O Lord, have blessed us by her presence in our midst at this moment, just as you have blessed the people of the Philippines by her leadership at another moment in a time of great need. You have blessed the whole world by her example of deep faith, both in the time of trial and suffering, during the imprisonment and assassination of her husband Benigno, and in the years of her political triumph. Many of Mrs. Aquino's fellow citizens who know from personal experience what she has meant to their country are with us today. They too bless us with their presence. We ask your continued blessings on Cory Aquino and her family, on the people of the Philippines, on the many Filipino people who, as citizens of the United States, rejoice now to greet on this soil one of the great people of their own country. Bless this university and keep it faithful to its commitment to educating students for a world restored through justice, transformed by peace, and reconciled by love. We make our prayer to God, the Creator and origin of all things, our Father, through His Son, Jesus Christ, in their Holy Spirit. Amen.
Please be seated. Our sincere thanks to all who have played a part in preparing for today's program, to all our special guests, and to all of you who have come to celebrate the life of this great woman. I would invite the audience to remain seated as the platform party proceeds out. And I hereby declare this Seattle University convocation held in honor of Mrs. Corazon Aquino concluded.